Men are fools, especially smart men. Smart men are especially foolish. They are so stupid sometimes. And I include myself in the category, by the way. I always pride myself on saying that, oh, I'm so fucking smart. You know, I got all these IQ points up the wazoo and whatnot. Yeah, but by the same token, just for the very fact that I have so many IQ points, I'm as big a fool as any. Oh yeah. You see, what's going on is that men don't understand that life is not purely rational. Yeah. Human beings are not rational agents. On the very contrary, people, human beings, tend to be completely emotional, completely governed by their emotions. More often than not, you'll find that people's actions come from a place of blind emotion, instinct almost, and only after the fact do they rationalize their behavior. Yeah, they rationalize and gussy up their behavior and make it seem as if it were logical. They act, or let me rephrase that, they explain away the things that they have done in terms of rationality, and they're very good at it. In fact, human beings are exceptionally good at rationalizing, most especially to ourselves. We tend to explain away our actions, our behaviors that were purely based on instinct and emotion, and we say somehow, oh, but you know, in the end it was actually the rational choice, the rational decision. But it was most certainly not the rational choice, the logical decision. Most often, people act in ways that are completely illogical, irrational, instinctive. I mean, you know, just totally the lizard hindbrain controlling their actions. And here is where men, smart men especially, fail. Here is where the smart man acts like a fool. A smart man, a self-consciously smart man, tends to think of himself as smart. And he tends to pride himself on acting rationally. And more often than not, he does act rationally. He does act in a way that is logical and rational and in his best long-term interest. But he tends to assume that everyone else does the exact same thing. And that's where he fails. That's where he comes across as a complete and utter fool. Because human beings are not rational, and most human beings instinctively realize this. And so when we see one of our peers acting in a way that's irrational, we don't say to ourselves, oh my God, that person is acting irrationally. No, we say to ourselves, oh, he's acting out of instinct, emotion, impulse, whatever. And perhaps we are not able to even articulate this. Perhaps we're not able to say that they're acting irrationally rather than rationally. But most people who are average in the intellect department recognize this, but the smart man does not. Yeah, not only does the smart man not understand that a lot of people are acting irrationally and instinctively and emotionally, many times the very smart man doesn't see that in himself. Yeah, like I said before, we're past masters at rationalizing our behavior. And so a lot of times, the smart man, the guy with a lot of fucking IQ points, he acts in a way that is completely irrational, completely instinctive, emotional, and then after the fact explains it away as a rational decision. He himself is blind, not only to the emotional motivation of other people, he's blind to his own emotional motivations, the feelings, emotions, moods that drive him. And he explains it away as just this big brain thinking. And that's why men so often as not are fools. Simple as that. Men are fools. Yeah? And it's much more than just that. You see, from an evolutionary perspective, men, as apart from women, men depended on rationality in order to get the woolly mammoth. Yeah, because the woolly mammoth is out there, objective reality. And we men have to face reality with as close an approximation to objectivity as possible. But women's survival depended on the social dynamic, understanding the emotions of the participants, the emotions, the emotional motivation of the other people in the social environment. You see the difference? And so because of that, men quite naturally evolved to be more rational and to sort of like hyper-focus on objective truth. And so they become blind to the emotional reality, not only of women, of other men. That's why women are better at emotions, identifying them, understanding them, managing them. That's why women, for instance, are far better than men at managing the emotions of children, small children. Well, I have a couple of small children, so I can tell you, they are like an emotional hand grenade. I mean, they are exploding every fucking second. They're exploding in sadness, they're exploding in happiness, they're exploding in amazement. I mean, everything is new, including their emotions. And so when they get hit by a burst of emotion, whatsoever that emotion may be, they just, spew it out there like a volcano. And a man is just terrible at handling that. Terrible, but women are much better because they understand it instinctively. The smartest man often does not fail to understand the emotional component of any given situation. And because of that, they act in ways that are counterproductive. For instance, a small child is upset over some toy or whatever. And instead of sort of like commiserating with the child, empathizing with the child, and trying to bring the child down from that emotional peak gently, slowly, the man tends to argue with the child. I've seen this plenty of times in parks and such, with the father is like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I got you your ice cream. Why are you crying? Do you want more ice cream? Trying to work the problem as if it were a rational problem instead of managing the emotion of the person, in this case, a child. And so, of course, you see the problem. See, men think that to manage something has to be solved. And women understand that a lot of times to manage emotions, you don't have to solve the problem that sparks the emotion. What you have to do is just simply empathize and listen. It sounds so foolish. It sounds so simple, deceptively simple, but that's it. That's all you need to do. But smart men fall for the mistake of trying to solve the problem because it's so tempting. Because see, for a smart guy, solving the problem always brings success. So whatever interdynamic is going on between a couple of people, emotional issues, well, the smart man will try to use his intellect to solve the problem because it's worked so well before, He had to build a bridge. Well, he used his brains and figured out the equations and solved the problem. He had to get to the moon. He had to hunt the woolly mammoth, all these different things that he does. He succeeded by using his intelligence, by using objective measures and appreciations of reality, and fail to understand that when it comes to people, the interactions with people, logic and reason doesn't really help. You have to understand the motivation, the emotional motivation of the opposing number or the participants in the dynamic, whatsoever that dynamic might be. Whenever I look at my comments, there's always a subcategory of people, of men, who sort of like don't understand what I'm saying because they are blind to the emotional component of what I'm saying. And the emotional component, not that I'm emotional, but rather the emotional component of a certain behavior. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, I think, I did a video called the Wall for Men. That men hit a wall also, and that other men are unwilling to follow the guy, and that's when that guy has hit his wall. And see, there were many comments of young guys who just didn't understand this emotional dynamic because they were saying, well, if a guy is 60-something but he knows a lot, so what? There are a lot of men who were 60-somethings who were very capable in their professions, who were commenting and saying, well, I'm 60-something and I'm really capable. Why aren't people following me? The rational decision for them would be for them to follow me because I know so much and I objectively have so much energy and so much strength to lead a project, and instead of leading, I'm being set aside. And you see what's going on? You see the foolishness of these men? Of these men who fail to understand that so often is not our decisions as human beings, especially when it comes to decisions affecting each other, such as who do you choose to lead you? Well, that's an emotional decision, and more often than not, it is controlled by emotions, and we rationalize it, and we try to tell ourselves that we're making the rational, logical choice. I mean, economics is all about that, which is very amusing. It's, for all intents and purposes, a discipline. An academic discipline that is trying to rationalize what are inherently emotional, irrational decisions based on the evolutionary pressures that have led us to behave in certain ways. It's incredibly amusing, but that's for another video. The point I'm trying to make here is that, see, as the so-called irrationality of others affects you more, you'll find yourself less understanding, more lost as to what's going on. See, like those 60-year-old guys who said that they don't understand why people aren't following them, why people aren't hiring them, even though because they are 60-something, they know so much more about their profession, about the technique, and about this and that and the other, and yet they're being shoved aside. And they were like incomprehending of the situation. Well, I'm telling you, see, men are fools, because the smart men, most especially, don't want to look at the emotional component of human beings' decisions. You know who are the most successful men? Have you noticed the most successful men, the guys who become the billionaires or the CEOs or whatnot? They are not the smartest guys. They're not the guys with the most IQ points. No, they're the guys who understood this human truth that our motivations, our decisions are emotional. Look at Apple. Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs founded that company. Steve Wozniak was objectively a hell of a lot smarter than Steve Jobs. Just smarter, more IQ points. But Jobs understood people. He understood them. He understood their motivation. He understood why they would do X, but not Y, but yes to Z. He understood that because he understood the issue of emotions. Steve Wozniak didn't really care what his products looked like so long as they were good products, successful products, you know, in the sense of achieving their goal, their objective. And Steve Jobs was all about making them pretty. You know, having the perfect looking computer. It wasn't enough that it worked the best, it had to look the best. And see how one man, indisputably smarter, was not so successful as the other man who understood people. Don't fall for this trap. Especially you who are really smart watching this video, don't fall for this trap. And it's so fucking easy to fall into this trap. Don't fall into it, because you're not going to achieve the things that you want. And in the end, you're going to be miserable and you will feel impotent, because it will seem as if people all around you are acting in ways that are completely irrational. It's because you are failing to adapt. That's why you're the fool.